Within the dim cave, a sudden convergence of light appeared on the stone platform. As the space subtly vibrated, two figures emerged from the light. Experiencing this kind of teleportation again, Zhou Yuan's head felt dizzy. He rubbed his forehead continuously, alleviating the discomfort. Yuan. As the light dissipated, a surprised voice came from ahead. Zhou Yuan looked up and saw Zhou Qing standing in front of the stone platform, looking at him with great joy. Father. Zhou Yuan smiled. You little rascal, you really scared me to death. Zhou Qing quickly stepped forward, his eyes full of urgency. Half a day ago, when he saw Zhou Yuan disappear on the stone platform, it had left him somewhat flustered. Seeing Zhou Qing's expression, Zhou Yuan knew that Zhou Qing must have been worried to death here. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, he scratched his head and quickly said, Father, my 8 meridians have appeared. What? Zhou Qing's body shook, and he quickly placed his hand on Zhou Yuan's shoulder, infusing his source energy into Zhou Yuan's body for a moment of detection. After a few moments, Zhou Qing learned the result and his hand couldn't help but tremble. He excitedly patted Zhou Yuan's shoulder heavily. Good, good, it's really the blessing of our ancestors, heaven has not abandoned our Zhou family. Zhou Qing's voice was trembling slightly, and his eyes were moist. One could imagine just how excited he was at this moment. The fact that Zhou Yuan could not cultivate was always a pain in his heart. In his view, it was his own incompetence as a father that led to Zhou Yuan being robbed of his destiny by the martial ancestor at birth, resulting in his current state. He had tried all means, but none could enable Zhou Yuan to cultivate. So he had placed his last hope on the secret words passed down in their Zhou family, but now it seemed that heaven was still favoring their Zhou family. Seeing the usually calm and majestic Zhou Qing revealing such an appearance in front of him, Zhou Yuan also felt warmth flowing in his heart. He reached out his arms, gently patted Zhou Qing's broad back, and smiled, Father, don't worry, whatever our Zhou family has lost, we will get it back. Zhou Qing collected his emotions and nodded heavily. Only then did his gaze fall on the girl in a green dress standing behind Zhou Yuan. She was standing there holding a gray little beast, her bright eyes looking calmly at them. Yuan. Zhou Qing looked at Zhou Yuan, puzzled, obviously not knowing why Zhou Yuan would bring a mysterious girl back with him when he returned. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan told Zhou Qing about what he had encountered in the mysterious space. Upon hearing this, Zhou Qing pondered for a moment and said, since our Zhou family ancestor left a secret message, then he should have had some interaction with that predecessor in black. Since you have received the favor of that predecessor, then naturally you should fulfill the predecessor's entrustment. After saying that, he showed a gentle smile to the girl in the green dress and said, young lady, if you have nowhere to go, you can stay in our dojo. Here, we will ensure your safety. Upon hearing this, Yao Yao gently nodded her head, her voice soft and indifferent, thank you. It's no trouble at all. Zhou Qing waved his hand with a smile, then turned to Zhou Yuan and said, now that your problem has been solved, we should prepare to return to Dezhou City. Your mother has been waiting for news. Zhou Yuan also nodded, he too wanted to immediately share this good news with Qing Yu. The three of them followed the secret passage out of the cave and left the ancestral shrine on the mountain peak. Zhou Qing went to order the forbidden army to set off, while Yao Yao held the little beast named Tun Tun, standing by the edge of the cliff, her beautiful eyes somewhat blankly looking at this unfamiliar world. The gentle breeze blew her clothes, outlining her exquisite curves, also making the girl appear somewhat lonely and cold. Only the Tun Tun in her arms, making comforting noises, was there to comfort her. Yao Yao sister, you don't have to worry, master's skills are vast, there won't be any trouble. In the future, we will definitely see him again. Zhou Yuan walked to Yao Yao's side and said softly that he knew that no matter how calm and indifferent Yao Yao appeared, being in a strange place would inevitably make her feel uneasy. Yao Yao glanced at him and said in a low voice, I know that Grandpa He drove me away because a great enemy is coming. Those enemies should be coming for me, and Grandpa he helped me block them. Although Zhang Yuan never told her these things, she still keenly felt that those disasters were probably brought by her. Zhou Yuan scratched his head, he was unclear about the two's identity and background, so he didn't know what story was hidden inside. Yao Yao sister, maybe things are really as you said, but I think you now should not blame yourself, otherwise it would be a waste of master's hard work, and everything he has done would lose its value. Zhou Yuan slowly said. Yao Yao gently stroked Tun Tun's soft fur, her gaze far away. Then she showed Zhou Yuan a stunning smile, nodded slightly, and said, don't worry, I'm not that kind of person. In the future, I will find out everything. If anything happens to Grandpa He, I will definitely avenge him. None of those people will get away. Her voice was calm and cold, but the chill it contained made Zhou Yuan shiver slightly. This little sister, who looked like a little fairy, seemed to be quite decisive and ruthless when she got serious. The Zhou Palace. When Qing Yu learned that Zhou Yuan's 8 meridians had appeared and he could cultivate, she was so excited that she hugged Zhou Yuan and cried, making Zhou Yuan both moved and helpless. Alright, it's a good thing that Yuan can cultivate, there's no need to cry. Zhou Qing, who was standing by the side, also said helplessly. You didn't cry. Qin Yu wiped her eyes and glared at Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing touched his nose somewhat awkwardly. When he sensed the 8 meridians in Zhou Yuan's body in the cave, he had almost shed tears, but he had forcefully suppressed them. You help Yao Yao settle in first. Zhou Qing didn't dare to say more and quickly changed the subject. Only then did Qin Yu realize that there were people watching. She wiped away her tears somewhat embarrassedly, then showed Yao Yao a gentle smile, and said, Yao Yao, from now on, just live here. We will never let you suffer any grievances. Qin Yu's attitude towards Yao Yao was extremely enthusiastic. Although it was mostly due to their gratitude for Zhou Yuan's help, it was obvious that she also liked Yao Yao very much. After all, who wouldn't be happy to see such a clear and beautiful girl? Yao Yao was a bit unaccustomed to Qin Yu's enthusiasm. After all, she had lived with Zhou Yuan in a place isolated from the world since she was a child, and she had never had contact with outsiders. Moreover, her personality was somewhat cold, and she was not very good at communicating with people. However, she could feel Qin Yu's heartfelt gratitude and sincerity, so she didn't show too much resistance. She just glanced at Zhou Yuan and let Qin Yu lead her away. Qin Yu took Yao Yao away first, and Zhou Qing and Zhou Yuan looked at each other and laughed helplessly. Your Majesty, Master Chu seeks an audience. Just then, a guard reported, and Master Chu was the master of the de Zhou mansion, Chu Tianyang, a powerful general under Zhou Qing's command. Let him in. Zhou Qing nodded, then looked at Zhou Yuan who was about to leave, and said, You stay too, you are after all the prince of our de Zhou, you should know some things. Zhou Yuan was taken aback, but didn't say much, just nodded. At the entrance of the inner hall, a burly figure stepped in. It was a middle-aged man in a purple robe. His face was resolute, and as he walked, it seemed as if the wind was following him, making a whistling sound. Greetings, Your Majesty. The man in the purple robe bowed to Zhou Qing, then looked at Zhou Yuan standing aside, nodded, and smiled, Your Highness. Master Chu. Zhou Yuan didn't dare to be negligent. Chu Tianyang was a heavy minister, deeply trusted by his father, and was his left and right arm, as well as the master of the de Zhou mansion. Zhou Qing waved his hand with a smile and said, What's the matter? Chu Tianyang, upon hearing this, first glanced at Zhou Yuan who was standing at the side. Zhou Qing smiled and said, It's okay, let him listen. Chu Tianyang nodded, then sighed with a wry smile, Your Majesty, Su Hong is now eyeing my position as mansion master. Zhou Yuan's heart tightened at the side. Su Hong was the current deputy master of de Zhou mansion. However, this guy was on the side of Prince Qi, regarding Prince Qi as his leader, often acting in a contradictory way to the royal family of de Zhou. Zhou Yuan knew before that Prince Qi had been coveting de Zhou mansion for a long time and wanted to control it, so he had been eroding it in secret. This Su Hong was placed in by him using various methods, trying to seize the position of mansion master of de Zhou mansion. Your Majesty, according to the information I secretly obtained, that young Prince Qiyu has been in de Zhou mansion, continuously using extremely high prices to coerce, lure, and win over the outstanding students who have appeared in de Zhou mansion. Just in this examination, more than half of the students who made it into the top 10 have been won over. And once these students pass the examination, they will directly choose to enter Su Hong's E-Institute. After the examination, it's the mansion examination. Over the past 2 years, the overall quality of the students in the E-Institute has been higher than that of my Jia Institute. They have already won the first place in the mansion examination twice. If they succeed again this time, Su Hong will have an excuse to make trouble and seek the position of mansion master. When Zhou Qing established de Zhou mansion back then, in order to encourage the various institutes, he set a rule that if the master of any institute could maintain the first place in the mansion examination for 3 years, he could run for mansion master. Originally, Chu Tianyang's Jia Institute was the strongest, but then a Su Hong appeared. With the strong financial support of Prince Qi, he continuously won over those outstanding students, resulting in the originally strongest Jia Institute being suppressed by the E-Institute for the past 2 years. Clearly, Su Hong is targeting the head of the Zhou Manor. If he becomes the head, then the Zhou Manor might fall into the hands of Prince Qi. The constant stream of outstanding talents will be intercepted by Prince Qi, which, for the royal family, is akin to cutting off their flesh and digging into their bones. Moreover, most importantly, if Prince Qi's scheme succeeds this time, it will lead many watching forces to believe that the royal family is declining and can no longer compete with Prince Qi. Once these forces all lean towards Prince Qi, that would be devastating. Zhou Yuan's brows are tightly knitted as he looks at Zhou Qing. The latter also has his brows twitching slightly. After a long while, a gloomy voice slowly emerges from between his teeth. This Prince Qi, he certainly has quite the appetite. Inside the inner palace, the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. Zhou Qing's face was gloomy, with a surge of murderous intent in his eyes. It was apparent that the actions of the Prince of Qi had filled him with a bellyful of murderous intent. However, in the end, Zhou Qing gritted his teeth and reined in his killing intent. After all, the current Prince of Qi was equally strong, and he also had the covert support of the Great Zhou Dynasty. If they were to go to war directly, even if they could win, the years of recuperation and rejuvenation of the Great Zhou Dynasty would be wasted. At that time, they would be plagued by internal and external troubles, and there was a high possibility of complete national annihilation. The Prince of Qi must be removed, but it had to be done step by step. The current Great Zhou Dynasty could not withstand too much turmoil. Zhou Qing took a deep breath and slowly said, "The prefectural examination is half a year away. This time, who has the best chance of winning the championship?" Chu Tianyang was silent for a moment before saying, "This batch of the Great Zhou Prefecture has produced some good talents. However, the most outstanding one is probably Qi Yu from the Institute. He has already opened his 6th meridian." Qi Yu. Zhou Qing's face was expressionless, his voice low. "The 2 sons of the Prince of Qi are indeed talented. The Prince of Qi had 2 sons, and Qi Yu was the second one. So, it seems that the first place in this prefectural examination is likely to fall into Qi Yu's hands." Upon hearing this, Chu Tianyang pondered for a moment and said, "This is not absolute. We also have a more outstanding genius in the Great Zhou Prefecture. If she can enter the Jia Institute, she may not be unable to compete with Qi Yu half a year from now." "Oh?" Zhou Qing was taken aback. Was there a more outstanding student in the Great Zhou Prefecture? Chu Tianyang smiled and then looked at Zhou Yuan, chuckling, "Has the king forgotten your little girlfriend, Su Yue?" Hearing Chu Tianyang's teasing laughter, Zhou Yuan was somewhat embarrassed, his face slightly red as he said, "Yue is my friend, not my little girlfriend." At this point, Zhou Qing also understood, saying in realization, "You're talking about that little girl who was recommended by Yuaner to enter the Great Zhou Prefecture, right? I have heard of her. She opened her first meridian just 1 month after entering the Great Zhou Prefecture." Chu Tianyang nodded and said, "Yes, her name is Su Yue. But now, she has already opened her 3rd meridian. Although she entered the prefecture a bit late, she will definitely rank among the top in this big examination. She has already opened 3 meridians." Zhou Qing exclaimed. This speed was indeed very fast. If this continued, she might be able to open all 8 meridians in another year and enter the Qi cultivation stage. This little girl named Su Yue was indeed very talented and had a limitless future. It seems that Yuaner has dug up a genius for our Great Zhou. Zhou Qing smiled at Zhou Yuan. Chu Tianyang also smiled, then looked a little worried, but according to the information I received, Qi Yu is also in contact with Su Yue. It seems that he wants to win her over. If he succeeds, Su Yue will likely join the Institute after passing the big examination. He looked at Zhou Yuan and smiled, "So I came here this time to ask for your help. At least help us, the Jia Institute, to secure Su Yue." Hearing this, Zhou Yuan's eyes sharpened a bit. This Qi Yu actually dared to set his sights on Yue. He trusted Su Yue very much, and he knew that Qi Yu would not be able to win her over. However, he was worried that Qi Yu would trip Su Yue up. "Your Highness, don't worry. I have arranged for someone to protect Su Yue in secret. She won't be harmed." Knowing what Zhou Yuan was thinking, Chu Tianyang smiled and said, "Only then did Zhou Yuan breathe a sigh of relief, nodding lightly, "You don't need to worry, Chu. After the big examination, Yue and I will both enter the Jia Institute." Chu Tianyang then nodded and smiled, "As long as your Highness can bring Su Yue into the Jia Institute, I can break the rules and let your Highness also enter the Jia Institute. According to the rules, only those who rank in the top 10 in the big examination are eligible to enter the Jia Institute." Although Zhou Yuan had some accomplishments in the source pattern, he was probably still not enough to enter the top 10. So in Chu Tianyang's view, if Zhou Yuan wanted to enter the Jia Institute, he still had to go through some special procedures. Being able to make you, who regard the rules as the sky, make concessions, it seems you really think highly of Su Yue. Zhou Qing couldn't help but laugh. Zhou Yuan looked at Chu Tianyang and also smiled, "It's Yue's luck to be valued by you. But as for me, you don't need to break the rules for me. I will try my best to strive for the top 10 in the big examination." If it were before, when he was unable to open his meridians, he might not have many ways other than relying on the source pattern. But now that his 8 meridians had appeared, he could officially cultivate. Naturally, he was no longer worried about not catching up with others. Upon hearing this, Chu Tianyang thought that Zhou Yuan, being young, wanted to save face, so he planned to persuade him again. "He, just let him try." Zhou Qing waved his hand at Chu Tianyang, then smiled and said, "Yuaner's 8 meridians have appeared, and he can officially cultivate." Upon hearing this, Chu Tianyang was taken aback, and then a look of joy couldn't help but emerge on his face. He said with a fist, "In that case, congratulations to the king and your highness." It was only then that he understood why Zhou Qing was so happy today. It turned out that the cultivation problem that had plagued Zhou Yuan for many years had finally been solved. "Then I'll wait for your highness to grace my Jia Institute at any time." Hee, maybe after half a year's prefectural examination, your highness can also win some glory for my Jia Institute. Chu Tianyang laughed. Of course, his words were mostly flattery. After all, in his view, although Zhou Yuan could now cultivate, he was still a bit late compared to others. So at least in this short half a year, he was probably not likely to compete with the top students of the Great Zhou Prefecture. After confirming Su Youwei's situation, Chu Tianyang seemed to be a lot more at ease. He talked with Zhou Qing about some other matters, and then he took his leave. Now that your 8 meridians have appeared, you can start preparing for cultivation tomorrow. Watching Chu Tianyang leave, Zhou Qing looked at Zhou Yuan and said, "All right." Zhou Yuan nodded slightly, his lean and youthful face remained calm, but his eyes were filled with a burning desire, full of anticipation. The next day at a large table, Zhou Yuan was seated on the right, with Yao Yao holding Tunten, while Zhou Qing and Qin Yu were on the left. On the table, a ceramic bowl about the size of a face basin was placed in front of Zhou Yuan. It was filled with brown soup, with a faint glow and a rich aroma emanating from it. Just taking a whiff of it made one's face flush. This is the 9-beast soup, made from the essence of 9 different first-grade origin beasts. It's a great tonic for beginners like you. In the past, you couldn't consume beast meat because you were unable to open your meridians and your body couldn't handle it. But now, you can. Zhou Qing said with a smile to Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan nodded. He knew that the 9-beast soup in front of him was a secret recipe of their royal family, and it was worth a fortune. It was so expensive that an ordinary family would probably not be able to afford it even with half a year's income, and this is what cultivation resources are all about. Also, you should stop eating regular rice from now on. Zhou Qing waved his hand, and a maid brought a silver bowl with rice. However, this bowl of rice was translucent, each grain was full and of the same size, with mysterious patterns faintly visible on the small rice body, emitting very gentle origin energy fluctuations. This is Xianjing rice, a second-grade origin food that contains very gentle and pure origin energy, easy to absorb. Long-term consumption can speed up the speed of meridian opening. So this is Xianjing rice. Zhou Yuan curiously looked at this crystal-like bowl of rice. He had heard about this so-called Xianjing rice, because it was essentially a strategic resource of their Great Zhou Dynasty. This Xianjing rice might not be as effective as the 9-beast soup, but it was gentle and long-term consumption could improve one's physique and speed up the process of meridian opening. Therefore, the cultivation of Xianjing rice has always been in the hands of the royal family, used to reward those who have made contributions and win the hearts of the people. So, although Xianjing rice is only a second-grade origin food, because of its special effects, its value is indescribable. Zhou Qing looked at Zhou Yuan, whose eyes were shining, and couldn't help but smile. He knew that Zhou Yuan had been coveting this Xianjing rice for a long time, but he couldn't eat it because he hadn't opened his meridians yet. Originally, our Great Zhou royal family had a 4th-grade origin food called blood jiao green barley, which was even more powerful. Long-term consumption could even strengthen the body and grow blood jiao scales, providing a strong defense. Zhou Qing sighed. 4th-grade origin food, blood jiao green barley. Zhou Yuan licked his lips. The 2nd-grade Xianjing rice was already very impressive. He wondered how much stronger the 4th-grade blood jiao green barley would be. Zhou Qing nodded, but then his face darkened. Unfortunately, during the Great Martial Rebellion, these strategic treasures of our Great Zhou royal family were all taken away by the martial king. Zhou Yuan was taken aback, then clenched his teeth in anger. This damn martial king had taken all the treasures that originally belonged to their Great Zhou. You eat first, and prepare to cultivate after you finish. Zhou Qing regained his composure and said to Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan nodded vigorously. Although the martial king was hateful, what he needed to do now was to eat heartily, then cultivate diligently. Only when he becomes stronger, can he take back what they lost from the Great Zhou. In front of Yao Yao, there was also a bowl of 9-beast soup and Xianjing rice. Yao Yao, you can try it and see if you like it. If you do, I'll make it for you often. Qin Yu looked at Yao Yao and said with a gentle smile. Yao Yao could feel Qin Yu's kindness and nodded slightly. She took a light sip of the 9-beast soup, but it seemed that she was not very interested in this highly nutritious beast soup. Instead, she picked up the Xianjing rice and ate it in small bites. Woof! Tunten in her arms was looking at her eagerly, wagging its tail and making pitiful sounds. Yao Yao glanced at it, thought for a moment, and then brought the 9-beast soup over. Ah, Yao Yao, the 9-beast soup is too potent, ordinary pets can't. Zhou Qing said with a smile. Roar. However, before he could finish his sentence, Tunten opened its mouth wide and swallowed the 9-beast soup, bowl and all, in one gulp. After swallowing the 9-beast soup, Tunten let out a burp, patted its belly with its paw, squinted its eyes, and seemed to be a little unsatisfied. Zhou Qing looked at Tunten, who didn't seem to be affected at all, and was stunned. Father, Tunten is an exotic beast, not ordinary. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan couldn't help but laugh. This Tunten could even swallow huge stones clean in 2 or 3 bites, let alone a bowl of 9-beast soup. Zhou Qing could only smile wryly and nod, then he took a jade bottle and poured himself a bowl of emerald-like liquor, with a strong aroma spreading out. As the aroma of the liquor spread, Yao Yao, who had been quietly eating xianjing rice, suddenly raised her eyebrows slightly, and then her clear eyes turned to Zhou Qing. "Can I have some of this?" Zhou Yuan and Qin Yu both looked at Yao Yao in astonishment. For the first time, her usually indifferent and delicate face showed a strong interest. Zhou Qing was also taken aback, especially when he saw Qin Yu's reproachful eyes accusing him of drinking recklessly in front of the young ones. He felt even more embarrassed. This is jade brew, it's a strong liquor, not suitable for young girls to drink. However, Yao Yao still insisted on looking at him with bright and clear eyes, which made Zhou Qing give a wry smile, and then ordered the maid to put a bottle of jade brew in front of Yao Yao. Yao Yao held the liquor bottle in her hand, tilted her head back slightly, revealing her swan-like white and slender neck, and directly gulped down a large mouthful of the jade brew. Immediately, her smooth and jade-like face flushed a little. "It's delicious." Yao Yao laughed lightly, her laughter was as pleasant as a silver bell. Qin Yu glared at Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing touched his nose and drank his wine in silence. He didn't expect that this mysterious girl, who always seemed indifferent to everything, would like to drink. Zhou Yuan on the side was quite interested. When Yao Yao was drinking, she undoubtedly appeared more stunning and lively. After drinking a bottle of jade brew clean, Yao Yao's clear eyes became more watery. She laughed lightly, reached into her sleeve and lightly touched something, then a light shot out and landed in front of Qin Yu. "Aunt Qin, I noticed that your vitality is weak. You must have suffered a great loss in your body. This little thing, consider it as my payment for the liquor." Yao Yao smiled, the light gradually dissipated, finally turning into a palm-sized green lotus. In the lotus, there were 8 lotus seeds shining with green light, like carved jade. "What is this?" Qin Yu stared at the green lotus in surprise. Zhou Qing looked at it and his face couldn't help but change. "This is the green jade lotus seed, a rare origin material, which can nourish the spirit and moisturize the body." Zhou Qing looked complicated. "This thing is of great use to you. Your body is too weak. This green jade lotus seed can help you lock in the escaping vitality." This green jade lotus seed was quite rare, even in their Great Zhou royal family's treasure house. It was not common. Qin Yu quickly shook her head. "Yao Yao, a bottle of jade brew is not worth this." But Yao Yao just smiled and held Tunton, leisurely walked out, leaving the 3 people at the table looking at each other in surprise. Zhou Yuan scratched his head. "Mother, you take it first, and find a way to repay Sister Yao Yao later." He was grateful for Yao Yao's action, because he knew that Qin Yu's body was so weak entirely because of him. Qin Yu and Zhou Qing looked at each other, and had to nod their heads, but in their hearts, they liked Yao Yao even more. Zhou Yuan laughed, then picked up the 9-beast soup, directly brought it to his mouth, gulped it down, swallowing all the soup without leaving a drop. After finishing the 9-beast soup, he picked up the xianjing rice, chewed it into pieces in 2 or 3 bites, and swallowed it. "Delicious." Zhou Yuan praised. The xianjing rice was full and soft, and each grain was fragrant. Huffed out a few minutes later, Zhou Yuan put down the bowl, took a long breath, and saw that his breath was like a white fog, floating in front of him, and his face became flushed at this time. His body seemed to be a furnace, with a hot breath flowing everywhere. Feeling the hot breath in his body, Zhou Yuan licked his lips, his eyes hot, and next, he was finally going to start cultivating in earnest. In the garden, where 100 flowers compete for fragrance, a stone pavilion stands tall, a small stream flows, serene and refreshing. Zhou Yuan was seated inside the stone pavilion, with his eyes slightly closed. A method of qi induction, dragon breath technique, which was taught by Zhang Yuan, was flowing in his mind. At the opening of the meridian realm, one cannot cultivate martial arts, but can only cultivate qi induction techniques, to draw the qi from heaven and earth into the body, washing over the blocked 8 meridians, gradually unblocking them. Therefore, for those at the opening meridian realm, the importance of qi induction techniques is indisputable. A profound qi induction technique can make the opening of the meridians twice as effective with half the effort. Initially, there were qi induction techniques in their royal family, but after weighing them up, Zhou Yuan chose the dragon breath technique, taught by Zhang Yuan. After all, Zhang Yuan was unfathomable, and what he chose to teach wouldn't be ordinary. This dragon breath technique, as its name implies, imitates a dragon's breath, and between inhalation and exhalation, the wind and cloud cease. To imitate a dragon's breath with a human body requires a very profound technique of cultivation to achieve resonance between flesh and blood, emitting a dragon's chant. Only then can the qi from heaven and earth be absorbed. Zhou Yuan carefully savored this dragon breath technique and finally found the most important method of cultivation hidden within it. 98 styles of dragon play. Because to achieve the imitation of a dragon's breath with a human body, one needs to cultivate the flesh and blood within the body, and these 98 styles of dragon play hidden in the dragon breath technique are the most important part. One by one, strange movements flashed in Zhou Yuan's mind. These movements, a total of 98 styles, were odd and peculiar. At a glance, they seemed like a dragon frolicking. Zhou Yuan memorized these movements completely, then walked out of the stone pavilion, raised his hands, and began the first movement slowly. The first practice was undoubtedly very crude. By the time Zhou Yuan had slowly completed the 98 movements, he was sweating profusely, his body as hot as a furnace. However, what made Zhou Yuan frown slightly was that after completing the 98 movements, although his body was hot, Zhou Yuan did not absorb a trace of qi from heaven and earth. I feel like I'm missing something, Zhou Yuan muttered to himself, then wiped away his sweat and continued to practice the 98 styles of dragon play. An incense sticks. Time later, Zhou Yuan stopped, drenched in sweat. He had completed the dragon play 3 times in a row, but still hadn't absorbed any qi from heaven and earth. This made him feel as if he was cultivating a counterfeit technique. Without a master's guidance, it's indeed a bit troublesome to explore on my own. Zhou Yuan shook his head helplessly. It seemed he would have to practice a few more times to explore the mystery within. Just as Zhou Yuan was about to continue practicing, he caught sight of a graceful figure standing in the flower garden out of the corner of his eye. His eyes brightened immediately, and he approached with a grin. "Yaoya, it's a coincidence that you're here, too. I want to ask you something." This graceful figure was naturally Yaoya. Hearing Zhou Yuan's voice, she looked at him with a tilted head, and then a smile appeared on her exquisite, jade-like face. She stretched out 5 slender fingers, "Promise to give me 5 bottles of jade brew every day, and I'll teach you." Zhou Yuan was stunned, then frowned. 5 bottles are too much, this wine is too strong, it's harmful to the body, so I can only give you 1 bottle a day. Yaoya wanted to say something. "No more than that, otherwise, I'll figure it out on my own." But Zhou Yuan put his foot down. If Zhang Yuan knew that Yaoya had become a heavy drinker after following him for only a few days, he would probably be so angry that he would kick him out of his sect. Seeing Zhou Yuan's insistence, Yaoya could only wrinkle her cute nose, snorted lightly, and then threw the tunton in her arms out. "Watch carefully." "Watch what?" Zhou Yuan asked in confusion, because Yaoya didn't seem to be demonstrating the dragon play. "Watch it." Yaoya pointed to the tunton on the ground and said impatiently. Zhou Yuan's mouth twitched, but before he could say anything, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he looked as if he had seen a ghost. Because on the ground, the chubby tunton suddenly stood up on its hind legs and began to perform a series of mysterious movements, which were exactly the 98 styles of dragon play. Can tunton actually practice the dragon play? Zhou Yuan was dumbstruck. Under Zhou Yuan's astonished gaze, tunton completed the 98 movements in one go. When the last movement fell, tunton's body suddenly shook, its mouth opened wide, and a faint dragon chant sounded. Hu. The qi between heaven and earth howled and came, as if it had turned into a visible white line, all pouring into tunton's mouth. After swallowing a mouthful of the majestic qi from heaven and earth, tunton patted its belly contentedly, turned its head to look at the stunned Zhou Yuan, and showed a disdainful white eye in a very human-like manner. At this moment, Zhou Yuan was gradually coming back to his senses, his eyes looking strangely at the little creature in front of him. What kind of source beast was this tunton that could even practice human martial arts? "Did you see clearly?" Yaoya's ethereal voice came. Zhou Yuan suppressed the shock in his heart, pondered for a moment, and then slowly said, "It's the breathing." When practicing the dragon play, one needs to maintain one's own breathing rhythm to resonate with the flesh and blood. The dragon breath technique imitates the true dragon's inhalation and exhalation, and tunton's every movement begins with exhalation and ends with inhalation. The combination of the two finally triggers the dragon's breath. Yaoya heard this, her bright eyes flashed, and she stared at Zhou Yuan with some surprise, and very rarely praised. Good insight. Just by watching tunton perform the dragon play once, he had keenly noticed the key point. With such insight, it's no wonder he was favored by Grandpa He. Zhou Yuan closed his eyes, recalling the breathing rhythm of tunton earlier. After a while, he slowly stretched his legs, raised his palms, and began the first movement of the dragon play again. In the flower garden, the young man's body moved, his chest heaving, his breathing becoming long and drawn out. From a distance, he seemed like a young dragon stretching its body. The 98 movements were closely connected, and Zhou Yuan's eyes seemed to become brighter at this moment. He could feel that the flesh and blood, and bones in his body, were beginning to vibrate faintly. A breath of air, as if climbing along the flesh and blood, finally rushed straight to his throat. When the last movement suddenly stopped, Zhou Yuan's face turned red, and his tightly closed mouth suddenly opened. Roar, a faint dragon chant, from his body through his throat. At the same time, Zhou Yuan's chest contracted, like a dragon sucking water, and the qi from heaven and earth in the flower garden was instantly drawn in, turning directly into a visible white line and rushing into Zhou Yuan's body. As this mouthful of qi entered, Zhou Yuan's skin immediately became hot, and the qi brought by the 9 beast soup and Xian crystal rice that he had drunk earlier also rose at this moment, converging with the pure qi that had entered his body, like a wave, rushing towards the blocked first meridian. The qi rushed into the blocked first meridian, causing intense pain that made Zhou Yuan groan. However, he clenched his teeth and endured the intense pain of rushing through the meridian, driving wave after wave of qi, continuously rushing towards the blocked first meridian. The qi washed over the first meridian wave after wave. This continued for a full half incense stick's time before it ended due to the exhaustion of qi. Zhou Yuan's face was covered in sweat, but his eyes were filled with joy. What a powerful dragon breath technique. Although he had not practiced other qi induction techniques, he knew that the more profound the qi induction technique, the more robust the qi that was absorbed into the body. As far as he knew, that solid Yuan technique, a qi induction technique of their royal family, could only support about half an incense stick's time for rushing through the meridian before the qi was exhausted, but the mouthful of qi he absorbed just now from the dragon breath technique supported a full half incense stick's time, which is nearly 10 times that of the solid Yuan technique. Although the 9-beast soup and Xian crystal rice played a small part in this, it was enough to show how powerful this dragon breath technique was. You've only just learned the basics of the dragon breath technique. If you can cultivate it to a higher level, you won't need the assistance of the dragon play. By then, you will have made it a natural instinct. Even if you don't activate the dragon breath technique, your normal breathing will become a dragon's breath, absorbing the qi from heaven and earth for you at any time. The light voice of Yao Ya on the side said. Zhou Yuan was moved to turn normal breathing into a dragon's breath, constantly inhaling and exhaling the qi from heaven and earth. How amazing would that efficiency be? After the first rush through the meridian just now, I've already unblocked a small part of the first meridian. At this rate, I'm afraid I'll be able to completely unblock the first meridian in less than a month. Zhou Yuan clenched his fist, feeling a bit excited, and with this kind of efficiency, it was evident that the dragon breath technique played a significant role. Of course, the 9-beast soup and Xian crystal rice also played a small part. Keep practicing. Zhou Yuan took a short break and was about to start practicing the dragon play again, but was stopped by Yao Ya. The latter glanced at him and said lightly, "You really don't care about your life, do you? Rushing through the meridian will cause some damage to the meridian, so most people can only rush through the meridian once a day, and have to wait until the next day when the meridian has recovered before they can rush through the meridian again. Otherwise, they will damage the meridian." Zhou Yuan was taken aback. He wasn't unaware of this, but he sensed the first meridian in his body, hesitated for a moment, and said, "But I feel like my meridian can still bear it." This time it was Yao Ya's turn to be stunned. Her watery eyes looked at Zhou Yuan with some doubt. "Are you serious?" Zhou Yuan nodded seriously. Yao Ya pondered for a moment and said, "Could it be because you were a natural meridian opener? Even though your meridians were blocked again, the strength of your meridians is still much stronger than that of normal beginners? Then you try again." Yao Ya put her jade hands behind her back, her blue dress wrapped around her delicate body, accentuating the rise and fall of her chest, which was very tempting. However, Zhou Yuan didn't dare to look too much, because Yao Ya's bright eyes were staring at him. Under the gaze of the young girl's bright eyes, Zhou Yuan moved again, performing the 98 forms of dragon play smoothly and unhurriedly. His proficiency had improved significantly, and coupled with his breath, he subtly resembled a flowing cloud and running water. Roar. As the final move fell, Zhou Yuan once again made a gesture of opening his mouth to inhale. A faint dragon chant echoed from within him, causing his body to tremble. The energy of the world began to converge, transforming into a white line that Zhou Yuan swallowed in one gulp. Boom. Boom. As the energy entered his body like a hot furnace, Zhou Yuan's thoughts moved, guiding the energy inside him like a wave, repeatedly washing over his first meridian. This process lasted for half an incense stick's time. Zhou Yuan's body faintly glowed red, a high temperature that evaporated his sweat. Feeling the loosening of his first meridian, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After a brief rest, under the girl's watchful gaze, he continued to perform the 98 forms of dragon played at IN. The following time, 2 faint dragon chants rang out one after another, signifying that Zhou Yuan had performed the meridian washing process 2 more times. This, combined with the previous 2 times, made 4 times in total, 4 times of meridian washing. Ordinary people who haven't opened a single meridian can only perform meridian washing once a day, as the meridians would find it hard to bear. However, Zhou Yuan did it 4 times, indicating how robust his meridians are. The girl next to him finally showed some ripples in her eyes at this moment, but at this time, Zhou Yuan had no heart to notice the girl's expression. He was boiling hot all over, sitting on the ground. He could feel a slight pain from the meridians in his body, indicating that after 4 times of meridian washing, his body's meridians were almost at their limit. He sensed his first meridian, and couldn't help but show a trace of joy at the corner of his mouth. The originally blocked first meridian, after these 3 times of meridian washing, had obviously loosened up again. Judging by this rate, I'm afraid I won't need a month. In just 10 days, I should be able to completely unblock this first meridian. Thinking of this speed, even Zhou Yuan, who is usually calm, couldn't help but show some excitement. He originally thought that opening a meridian again would be harder than for others, and was prepared that it would take several months to open one. Who would have thought that with the help of the powerful dragon suction technique and his robust meridians, the time would be greatly shortened? When Su Yue opened her first meridian in 1 month, she became the fastest person in the Zhou mansion to do so. So what level would he be at if he could open a meridian in 10 days? Of course. Zhou Yuan was clear that Su Yue's 1-month meridian opening was based on her talent and herself, as she didn't have a profound qi guiding technique, nor the 9 Beast Soup and Xian Crystal Rice. So, it's hard to say who is better. However, one thing can be confirmed is that due to the second opening of the meridian, when Zhou Yuan opens the first meridian, it will definitely be stronger than Su You's first meridian. As for how much stronger, it can only be tested at that time. It seems that even Grandpa He underestimated your second opening of the meridian. The girl's surprised and light voice sounded. Zhou Yuan smiled and said, perhaps people as miserable as me are rare. Upon hearing this, the girl nodded in agreement. Her face, as smooth as jade, showed a faint smile and said, that's true. You were a natural meridian opener, but now your 8 meridians have been sealed again. This situation is very rare. Chirp chirp. On the ground, the creature pointed at Zhou Yuan, and there was a hint of mockery in its eyes. Being laughed at by a small beast, Zhou Yuan gritted his teeth, picked up a stone from the side and threw it at the creature. Roar. However, facing the thrown stone, the creature opened its mouth and swallowed it cleanly, then provocatively showed its teeth and claws at Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan laughed in anger, turned his gaze, and reached into his arms to take out a piece of dried meat. This was made from the meat of a source beast and was carefully roasted. It was also what he used to recover his physical strength. The creature's eyes were fixed on the dried meat as soon as it appeared. Its pink tongue stuck out, drooling. Hee hee. Zhou Yuan laughed at it, then put 2 or 3 bites in his mouth and ate it. You little beast, let's see how you like that. Roar. Roar. Seeing this, the creature immediately became angry and let out a low growl. The girl looked at Zhou Yuan teasing the creature and suddenly said, if it gets angry, it really will swallow people. Do you want to see what it's like inside its stomach? I've never seen anything come out alive from its stomach. Zhou Yuan's chewing mouth suddenly stopped. He saw the creature standing up angrily and staring at him. Then he forced a smile at the girl and said, you would stop it, right? The girl's lips curved slightly, and she said ambiguously, perhaps. You're ruthless. Zhou Yuan gritted his teeth, decisively took out all the dried source beast meat from his arms, and handed it to the creature with a smile, saying, here, eat as much as you want, until you're full. The creature immediately pounced in front of Zhou Yuan, its tongue rolled out, and swallowed the stack of dried meat. After a few chews, it seemed to be very satisfied with the taste, and its tail even started to wag happily. After eating the dried meat, the creature seemed to look at Zhou Yuan a little more kindly. It stood upright, one paw resting on Zhou Yuan's shoulder, patting it lightly as if to say, you did well. Zhou Yuan's mouth twitched slightly. This little beast was almost becoming cunning. Miss Yao Yao, what grade of source beast is this creature? Zhou Yuan looked at the girl and asked curiously, because he had never seen a source beast with such high intelligence. This creature, which looked like a little dog, should have an extraordinary origin. Upon hearing this, the girl also looked thoughtful, but finally shook her head and said, I don't know. Since I can remember, it has always been by my side. However, Grandpa He once said that if it fully grows up, there won't be many things in this world that it can't swallow. Zhou Yuan secretly marveled. He had given such a high evaluation to the creature. It seems that this little beast is really not simple. Miss Yao Yao, I heard Master say before that you are quite accomplished in source patterns. Zhou Yuan flicked away the creature's paw resting on his shoulder, then looked up at the girl and smiled. The girl raised her eyebrows slightly and said, want to learn source patterns? Learning source patterns has always been a part of my studies. After all, if I can't open my meridians, that would be my last hope. Zhou Yuan said honestly. The girl leaned forward slightly, her slender jade finger picked up the creature and held it in her arms, gently stroking it. The creature was comfortably lying between her soft and fragrant bosom, arching slightly. Zhou Yuan's eye twitched at the sight and he muttered to himself that the little beast was lucky. The girl walked gracefully into the stone pavilion, sat elegantly on the stone bench, then propped her cheek with her hand, lazily looking at Zhou Yuan, and said, teaching someone is too tiring. I don't want to do it. Zhou Yuan also climbed onto another stone bench and sat down, and directly made an offer. Although jade brew is a fine wine, there are many better ones. I'll help you find them. Upon hearing this, a smile immediately appeared on the girl's face, making the flowers in the garden pale in comparison. It also made Zhou Yuan's heart skip a beat. She smiled slightly and said, you really know how to please. Zhou Yuan also smiled, then said, but you can still only drink 1 bottle a day. The girl's smile faded, and she looked at him somewhat angrily, but this time, Zhou Yuan did not back down. After all, although one has preferences, they cannot be indulged without restraint. He had said that the girl could not use energy and drinking too much would inevitably harm her body. Seeing Zhou Yuan not relenting, the girl gritted her teeth, but in the end, she could only glare at him resentfully. You should know that the most important thing in source patterns is what? The girl calmed down her annoyance, her tone became flat, and said, soul. Zhou Yuan replied. The girl nodded slightly and slowly said, then do you know the division of the realms of the soul? There are 4 realms of the divine soul, the illusory realm, the real realm, the transformative realm, and the wandering soul realm. Only those with a powerful divine soul can inscribe those high-level origin marks. Your divine soul's talent isn't bad, but it can't even be considered as the illusory realm yet. In the stone pavilion, a young girl's light voice rings out. The sunlight pours down, falling on her jade-like, smooth face, making her look exceptionally clear and attractive. The divine soul is inherently formless. Only through continuous cultivation can the divine soul transform from formless to tangible. The first stage of this transformation is the illusory form, also known as the illusory realm. To strengthen the divine soul, there are two methods. The first is to wait for your own strength to progress, and the divine soul will strengthen along with the increase in personal strength. However, this method is relatively slow and has limited improvement. The second method is to cultivate the soul forging technique, but such techniques are rare in the world and only possessed by some major powers. Speaking to this point, Yao Yao glanced at Zhou Yuan and said, "The chaos divine grinding visualization technique that Old Black passed on to you is one of the top soul forging techniques. However, to cultivate this technique, you need great courage to overcome great fear. You will understand this when you start cultivating. With your current divine soul, you are still unable to inscribe a first-grade origin mark. I suggest you start cultivating the chaos divine grinding visualization technique as soon as possible to elevate your divine soul to the illusory realm. Once your divine soul enters the illusory realm, I will teach you how to inscribe a first-grade origin mark." Zhou Yuan nodded. He had been wanting to try the chaos divine grinding visualization technique for a long time. He took a deep breath, sat cross-legged on the stone bench, and slowly closed his eyes. As his eyes closed, his vision immediately darkened. Zhou Yuan's heartbeat gradually slowed, allowing his state of mind to reach an absolutely quiet state. Thump. Thump, the sounds of birds and wind from the outside world slowly faded away, leaving only the sound of his heartbeat echoing in the darkness. In the darkness, Zhou Yuan stimulated his divine soul, sensing the imprint transmitted by the abyss, and the chaos divine grinding visualization technique was also within this imprint. As Zhou Yuan sensed it, a glimmer of light suddenly appeared in the darkness. The light slowly rotated, its depth unfathomable, as if it were hiding something terrifying. However, just as Zhou Yuan's divine soul was slightly hesitating, the light suddenly erupted with a strong suction force, directly sucking Zhou Yuan's divine soul into it. A brief dizzying sensation appeared, and Zhou Yuan noticed that the surrounding scenery began to change. The darkness retreated, replaced by a chaotic void. The chaos here swallowed time and space, making everything seem as if it were before the world was opened. Zhou Yuan's formless divine soul stood in this vast chaotic void. A sense of insignificance surged up, leaving him at a loss. Boom. Boom. Just as Zhou Yuan's divine soul was looking at the endless chaotic void, a loud noise echoed from within the chaos. Zhou Yuan's divine soul looked over, and the next instant, a trembling sensation surged out, causing Zhou Yuan's divine soul to tremble violently because within that chaos, he saw a giant shadow slowly emerging. The shadow was like a black hole, constantly devouring everything. However, it was not a black hole, but an endless giant grindstone. The giant grindstone was mottled, covered with traces of time. Its surface was dark and seemed to be made from the crushed blood of gods and demons. Rumble, the giant grindstone stood in the chaos, slowly rotating. Under its rotation, all things were being ground to dust. Zhou Yuan's divine soul stood in front of the giant grindstone, as small as dust. At this moment, a mysterious piece of information began to flow through his heart. That was the cultivation method of the chaos divine grinding visualization technique. In the chaos, there is a divine grindstone. When the divine grindstone turns, gods and demons are destroyed. Visualize the divine grindstone, use the divine soul as a guide, and experience the grinding of the divine grindstone. The divine grindstone turns 9 times, 1 turn for each heaven. Zhou Yuan's divine soul trembled slightly. At this moment, he finally understood why Yao Yao would say that cultivating this chaos divine grinding visualization technique requires overcoming great fear. Because standing in front of this boundless, world-crushing divine grindstone, anyone's divine soul would surge with an uncontrollable fear. Zhou Yuan's divine soul trembled as he looked at the divine grindstone in the chaos. Just standing here required great courage, let alone this soul-forging technique which required one to throw their own divine soul into it to experience its grinding. If Zhou Yuan wasn't mentally tough, he would probably have turned and run by now. Let's die if we have to. The trembling continued, and in the end, Zhou Yuan still retained some sanity. He gritted his teeth, and his divine soul floated out, directly falling into the boundless giant grindstone. Boom! The moment Zhou Yuan's divine soul fell into the giant grindstone, Zhou Yuan watched as the dark shadow enveloped him. Then, a terrifying pain erupted from his divine soul. In just a few moments, Zhou Yuan's divine soul was ground into nothingness under the grinding of the divine grindstone. A slight tremor in the chaos, an invisible wave gathered. It was Zhou Yuan's divine soul. If the divine soul had a face at this moment, Zhou Yuan's would probably be pale, his eyes filled with fear, because in that previous moment, the feeling of being destroyed was too real. However, although he was trembling with fear, between the grinding and the rebuilding, his divine soul seemed to have become a little more condensed. What a perverted soul-forging technique. Zhou Yuan trembled in his heart. If it were someone with a weaker mental fortitude, they would probably have been destroyed by the fear by now. Once the fear of the divine grindstone was imprinted in their hearts, the divine grindstone in front of them would dissipate along with it, and the cultivation of the chaos divine grinding visualization technique would end in failure. This chaos divine grinding visualization technique is about repeatedly throwing the divine soul into the divine grindstone. In those countless grindings, the divine soul is continuously destroyed and rebuilt, thus transforming into something stronger. According to the method, this chaos divine grinding visualization technique is divided into 9 turns, 1 turn for each heaven. The so-called 9 turns actually means that the divine grindstone completes a full rotation 9 times. As long as the divine soul can endure a complete rotation of the divine grindstone, the divine soul will undergo a transformation. Zhou Yuan looked at the divine grindstone in the chaos. The divine grindstone was divided into 2 layers, and in the middle of the 2 layers, there was a faint dark golden vertical line, like a scale. As the divine grindstone rotated, the golden vertical line on the upper layer would move. When it returned to its original position and overlapped with the golden vertical line on the lower layer, it would represent a complete turn. However, when Zhou Yuan's divine soul entered it just now, he could only endure for a few moments before being ground to dust. It seemed that it was not easy to endure a complete turn of the divine grindstone, but this chaos divine grinding visualization technique is indeed not simple. Just by trying it once, my divine soul has become slightly stronger. It really deserves to be the top-level soul-forging technique that Yao Yao mentioned. Zhou Yuan took a deep breath, struggling to suppress the fear of the divine grindstone in his heart. He gritted his teeth, and his divine soul flew out again, falling into the slowly rotating modeled divine grindstone. Boom. Boom, the divine grindstone rotated, and Zhou Yuan's divine soul was crushed into nothingness once again. Invisible waves emerged, and Zhou Yuan's divine soul was rebuilt again. The divine soul fluctuated violently, obviously still calming its emotions. After a while, he gritted his teeth and threw himself into the divine grindstone again. Boom. Boom. In the chaos, the divine grindstone rotated time and time again, grinding all the dust that entered it into nothingness, and in those countless grindings, the continuously rebuilt divine soul gradually started to transform from formless to a faint transparent color. 88 times after Zhou Yuan's divine soul was ground and rebuilt for the 88th time, he finally stopped. Because he felt a strong sense of fatigue and pain springing from his divine soul, this made him realize that his cultivation had reached its limit for today. If he continued to force himself, it would be more harmful than beneficial. However, although his divine soul was fatigued, Zhou Yuan's heart was filled with joy. Because after those 80+ grindings of the divine soul, his originally formless divine soul had completely transformed into a transparent color illusory realm. When the divine soul transforms from formless to illusory, it means that his divine soul has stepped into the threshold of the illusory realm. What an amazing visualization technique. Zhou Yuan praised again. Just after the first cultivation session, his divine soul has entered the threshold of the illusory realm. Although he knew that this should be related to his not weak divine soul foundation, it was enough to show the extraordinary nature of this visualization technique. In the stone pavilion, Zhou Yuan's tightly closed eyes slowly opened. Although his face was pale, the excitement in his eyes couldn't be concealed. I've entered the illusory realm. Hearing Zhou Yuan's words, Yao Yao was slightly surprised and asked doubtfully, so soon? How many times have you endured the divine grindstone? 88 times. Yao Yao's slender eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a strange light in her eyes. Normally, when people cultivated this chaos divine grinding visualization technique for the first time, they could only endure it about a dozen times. However, Zhou Yuan had endured it 88 times, far surpassing ordinary people. Indeed, you are worthy of being a person who once possessed the luck of a holy dragon. Compared to your battered body, your divine soul has not been damaged. Yao Yao lightly praised, then said, your divine soul is too weak today. Once you've recovered, I'll teach you the first grade origin mark. She held her arms and stood up, then looked at the mottled black pen stuck in Zhou Yuan's waist and said, you should take good care of this heavenly Yuan pen that old black gave you and light up its first origin mark as soon as possible. Zhou Yuan lowered his head, and his palm pulled out the heavenly Yuan pen from his waist. He skillfully rotated it in his palm and nodded with a smile. Abyss had said that the spirit of the heavenly Yuan pen could be restored using the soul of a source beast. This was not difficult for him. As a prince of the Great Zhou Dynasty, he could easily obtain some source beast souls. As for the changes in this heavenly Yuan pen after lighting up the first origin mark, Zhou Yuan was also very curious. After all, he was curious about how this seemingly foot-long heavenly Yuan pen would transform into a source weapon. On the second day, early in the morning, after Zhou Yuan had a bowl of 9 beast soup and a bowl of Xianjing rice, he continued his practice of the 98 forms of dragon play, drawing in the source chi and striking to open his meridians. It took him a small part of the morning, during which Zhou Yuan made 4 attempts to open his meridians. Even though he was sweating profusely and experiencing piercing pain in his meridians, the increasing looseness in his first meridian filled his heart with excitement and anticipation. A maid handed him a towel. After Zhou Yuan wiped himself clean, she respectfully said, "Your Highness, the item you requested has arrived." Oh? Upon hearing this, Zhou Yuan was delighted. He quickly went into his room and, sure enough, saw a jade plate on the table. On the plate were neatly arranged 10 crystals of different colors. Upon closer inspection, one could see faint shadows inside the crystals, forming various animal shapes and emitting strange light. These were beast soul crystals. When a source beast dies, its soul condenses into a crystal to protect the beast's soul. Zhou Yuan wanted these beast soul crystals to nourish his heavenly Yuan brush. "They're all first-grade beast soul crystals," Zhou Yuan noted. These beast soul crystals all came from first-grade source beasts, which was just right. If the quality of the beast soul crystals was too high, the current state of the heavenly Yuan brush might not be able to withstand it. Zhou Yuan pulled the heavenly Yuan brush from his waist. He rubbed the mottled body of the brush in his palm. The rough texture of the brush and the slightly dim bristles were the only indicators of the brush's previous brilliance. Zhou Yuan took a small hammer and directly smashed one of the beast soul crystals, revealing a small hole. He then inserted the tip of the heavenly Yuan brush into it. As soon as the heavenly Yuan brush came into contact with the beast soul inside the beast soul crystal, it began to vibrate slightly. The bristles on the tip of the brush curled up and wrapped around the beast soul. With a sucking sound, the beast soul disappeared, directly absorbed into the heavenly Yuan brush. With the disappearance of the beast soul, the heavenly Yuan brush in Zhou Yuan's hand emitted a faint glow, and the first ancient source pattern on the brush body became slightly brighter. "It really works." Zhou Yuan was slightly happy and continued the process, smashing the beast soul crystals one by one and using the heavenly Yuan brush to absorb the beast souls inside. As the heavenly Yuan brush absorbed more and more beast souls, the glow on the brush body became brighter and brighter, and the first ancient source pattern began to emit a faint glow. However, when the heavenly Yuan brush absorbed the 8th beast soul, the absorption suddenly stopped. No matter how Zhou Yuan manipulated it, the heavenly Yuan brush would not absorb any more, and the glow on the brush body gradually subsided. "Is it full?" Zhou Yuan was stunned, then he understood and couldn't help but laugh. This damn heavenly Yuan brush, he wanted it to absorb beast souls and restore its spirit, but it was too full to eat. However, the heavenly Yuan brush was very stubborn. Once it was full, it refused to eat anymore. Zhou Yuan had no choice but to put it away, planning to continue feeding it the next day. This meant that it would take some time to activate the first ancient source pattern, but Zhou Yuan was not in a hurry. He put the heavenly Yuan brush back in his waist and left the room. He planned to visit the Zhou mansion today. Although he trusted Su Yuwei not to be persuaded by Qiyu, he still had to visit often to prevent Qiyu from causing trouble behind his back. Zhou mansion, Zhou Yuan strolled around but didn't see Su Yuwei. After asking around, he found out that she had gone to the library to work. The library of the Zhou mansion used to be deserted, but ever since Su Yuwei started working there part-time, it had become a bustling place. People often came to borrow books under the pretext of getting close to Su Yuwei. Zhou Yuan entered the library and didn't see Su Yuwei at the counter. He walked around and then stopped, looking between the giant bookshelves ahead. There, a slender young girl was standing on a high chair, tidying up the books and carefully wiping off the dust. This moment, rays of sunlight were scattered through the window, dust was dancing in the sunlight, and the girl's crystal-clear face reflected the light. Her long eyelashes flickered, her mouth was slightly raised, and she was humming a tune softly, filled with youthful vitality. Cough, Zhou Yuan coughed lightly, ruthlessly breaking this beautiful scene. Su Yuwei was startled and quickly looked down. Seeing Zhou Yuan, her face immediately lit up with joy. Zhou Yuan walked under the high chair, looked up, and was taken aback. Because Su Yuwei was wearing a uniform with a skirt, what entered his sight were 2 long, slender, and fair legs, smooth as jade, which made people want to touch them. "Your Highness." Noticing Zhou Yuan's gaze, Su Yuwei blushed and angrily said. The thick book in her hand shook, and a layer of dust fell down, blocking Zhou Yuan's view. "Ah, I've been blinded." Zhou Yuan quickly took the opportunity to cover his eyes. Su Yuwei jumped down from the high chair, put the book on the shelf, blushed and glared at Zhou Yuan, who was pretending, and said, "Pervert." Zhou Yuan opened his eyes and helplessly said, "It was an accident." Su Yuwei snorted and said, "How come His Highness, who is busy all day, has time to come here?" "Hee hee, if I don't come, I'm afraid my little Wei Wei will be taken away by someone else," Zhou Yuan laughed. "Yikes, so cheesy. Don't call me that." Su Yuwei's face turned red, and she angrily glared at Zhou Yuan, then pouted and said somewhat annoyedly, "You know about it? Qiyu has been looking for me several times, it's so annoying. Did he ask you to join the E Academy after the big test?" Zhou Yuan narrowed his eyes. This Qiyu was really ruthless, even daring to dig his corner. Su Yuwei nodded. She didn't know much about the power struggle in the Zhou mansion, but she knew that Zhou Yuan and Qiyu didn't get along. So she had been just going through the motions and putting off Qiyu's various attempts to win her over. What did that guy offer you? Su Yuwei gave Zhou Yuan another look. It sounded terrible, but she knew that wasn't what Zhou Yuan meant, so she said, he promised me wealth and power, and he also promised to give me a technique to cultivate a third-grade source qi after I step into the qi nurturing stage. He's really generous. Zhou Yuan was somewhat surprised. A technique to cultivate a third-grade source qi. You know, the highest level of source qi technique in their royal family is only 4th grade. But I still refused. Su Yuwei's eyes were moist and shimmering. She laughed softly and said, he was very unhappy and asked me what you had given me. I said, His Highness didn't give me anything. He just helped me kick open a door. Her voice became softer, but it made Zhou Yuan chuckle. He had just happened to pass by when he saw a little girl kneeling in the rain in front of a pharmacy, begging pitifully. Out of indignation, he stepped forward and kicked open the closed door of the pharmacy, but he didn't know that his unintentional action at the time had left a deep impression on Su Yuwei. Qiyu must be furious, Zhou Yuan said. That has nothing to do with me. Su Yuwei covered her mouth and giggled. Zhou Yuan nodded, thinking to himself that after Su Yuwei stepped into the qi nurturing stage, he should also prepare a high-quality technique for her. Otherwise, it would be a waste of her talent. How has your meridian opening been lately? Zhou Yuan asked. Not bad, I should be able to open the 4th meridian before the big test, Su Yuwei said casually. Zhou Yuan clicked his tongue in admiration. Su Yuwei's talent was indeed outstanding. If she also had the same conditions as him, drinking 9-beast soup and eating Xianjing rice every day, even Qiyu might not be able to compete with her, but Zhou Yuan dared not bring 9-beast soup and Xianjing rice to Su Yuwei every day. This girl was very sensitive and stubborn and would definitely not accept Zhou Yuan's help. Chu Mansion Master told me that he must get you into the Jia Academy. Zhou Yuan looked at Su Yuwei and said that. Su Yuwei thought for a moment and grinned, then you tell him, if you also go to the Jia Academy, I will go. She spoke casually, but there was some worry in her eyes. Because to enter the Jia Academy, one must be in the top 10 in the big test. And Zhou Yuan, who had not opened his meridians, could hardly make it into the top 10 with his entry-level source patterns alone, and as far as she knew, Chu Mansion Master was a person who valued rules. If Zhou Yuan couldn't make it into the top 10, even if he was a prince, Chu Mansion Master might not give him face. Zhou Yuan looked at her and knew what she was thinking. He was a bit touched and laughed. Don't worry about me, I will definitely get into the Jia Academy. Seeing Zhou Yuan so confident, Su Yuwei didn't say anything more, just nodded. The two of them walked out of the bookshelf, laughing and talking. As soon as they turned the corner, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. It was a slightly tall young man with a handsome appearance. He looked at Zhou Yuan and Su Yuwei, who came out together. His face changed slightly, then he showed a restrained smile. Your Highness. Then his gaze turned to Su Yuwei, and his eyes softened. Yuwei, are you done? Do you have time today? Can I invite you for a meal? Zhou Yuan looked at the handsome young man, his eyes slightly narrowed, recognizing him. Lin Feng, a rising star among the new students of the Zhou mansion, rumored to be a strong contender for the first place in the upcoming big test, but as far as he knew, this guy had already been won over by Qiyu. As Zhou Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, Su Yuwei also saw the handsome young man in front of her. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, then she smiled and said, It's young Master Lin, but I'm afraid I don't have time today. Hearing Su Yuwei's polite rejection, Lin Feng didn't show any disappointment. Instead, he nodded and said with a smile, In that case, it'll have to wait until next time. He didn't persist, showing a courteous demeanor. However, this attitude made Su Yuwei sigh helplessly in her heart. This type of person was even more difficult to deal with. Zhou Yuan didn't say anything. He just gave Lin Feng a faint smile, then left with Su Yuwei. Lin Feng watched their retreating figures, his gentle face becoming somewhat gloomy. Hee, it seems your chances are slim. A light laughter came from behind Lin Feng. He turned his head and saw Qiyu in white. Prince. Lin Feng composed himself and bowed slightly. Qiyu stood next to Lin Feng, looking in the direction Zhou Yuan and Su Yuwei had left, and said with a smirk, Our prince, although he can't cultivate, his status is there, and he once helped Su Yuwei. I'm afraid you don't have much chance. Lin Feng's eyes darkened, his lips tightly pressed, showing clear unwillingness. Have you really fallen for Su Yuwei? Seeing his expression, Qiyu couldn't help but laugh. Although Su Yuwei is just a commoner, she has the qualification to change everything. In the future, she will definitely stand out and attract attention, Lin Feng said. Qiyu nodded slightly and sighed. Indeed, with Su Yuwei's talent, it's only a matter of time before she rises. Our prince is indeed lucky. Anyone he picks up turns out to be a genius. Lin Feng's eyes became more passionate as he slowly said, "That's why I won't give up." Qiyu smiled faintly and said, "Compared to our prince, you're not weak. He just has the title of prince. Without that, he wouldn't even be worthy of your attention." Lin Feng didn't respond, but a hint of pride emerged in his expression. To him, if Zhou Yuan wasn't a prince of the Zhou Dynasty, his inability to cultivate would probably make him unworthy of Lin Feng's attention. "I do hope you can win Su Yue over. That way, I'll have one less major trouble." Qiyu laughed and said, "I've tried to recruit her before, offering many conditions, but none of them could convince her to join the Institute after the big test. It seems she really cares about Prince Zhou." Lin Feng's face darkened slightly. "But I do have a method." Qiyu paused. "The big test is in a month. Zhou Yuan will participate. If he suffers a terrible defeat, it should be a significant blow to his status." Lin Feng's eyes flashed. The Zhou dynasty was a martial country. Even if Zhou Yuan was a prince, if he didn't achieve anything, he would still be the subject of much discussion. At that time, Su Yue should be able to see clearly that a ruined prince wasn't worth relying on. "What does the prince mean?" Qiyu smiled faintly and said, "During the big test, I will manipulate things so that Zhou Yuan encounters you. At that time, you should know what to do to suppress his status." Upon hearing this, Lin Feng hesitated and said, "He is a prince after all. If we go too far, in a competition, accidents happen. No one can say anything." Qiyu shook his head and said, "Since your Lin family has chosen to stand with us, we will protect you even if there's trouble." Lin Feng's eyes flickered. After a moment, he gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "All right, I understand. If I meet him during the big test, I will make our prince lose in the most humiliating way." He looked up at Zhou Yuan's retreating figure, a ruthless look flashing in his eyes. A ruined prince dared to steal his woman. In that case, he would have to teach him a lesson. Qiyu smiled faintly. If Zhou Yuan was humiliated, he could go to Su Yue again. The girl should be able to distinguish between the strong and the weak by then. As long as she joined the Institute, no one would pose a threat to him in this test. Then, the Zhou mansion would fall into their hands, and in the future, the students from the Zhou mansion would all bear their mark. At that time, the Zhou dynasty might have to change hands. "I'm afraid Lin Feng has teamed up with Qiyu," Zhou Yuan said to Su Yue as they walked through the courtyard. "This might be Qiyu's scheme. If he can't win you over openly, he'll use a handsome boy." Su Yue shook her head in annoyance. "Don't worry, Your Highness. The handsome boy trick won't work on me." She paused and said with some concern, "But Your Highness, you should be careful too. Most of the outstanding newcomers have been won over by Qiyu. I'm worried they will trip you up during the big test. With Zhou Yuan's strength, it would be quite difficult to make it into the top 10 in the big test. If others were to trip him up, it would be even more difficult." Zhou Yuan smiled and said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." He took a deep breath and said slowly, "The power of the Qi mansion is indeed strong." Qiyu's conditions for recruitment were almost irresistible, and his financial resources were even comparable to those of the royal family. It seemed that his father was right. The Qi mansion was indeed backed by the great marshal. Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan's eyes flashed with cold light. The Qi mansion was indeed a cancer of the Zhou dynasty. They even wanted to get their hands on the Zhou mansion now. Once the Zhou mansion fell into the hands of the Qi mansion, it would undoubtedly be a huge blow to the royal family. Therefore, they must not succeed. Of course, the most important thing right now was to open his meridians as soon as possible to prepare for the upcoming big test. In the following days, Zhou Yuan stayed in the palace, practicing the 98 dragon play in the early morning, rushing through his meridians 4 times, and cultivating the chaos divine grinding visualization method to strengthen his soul at night. In just a few days, Zhou Yuan had made considerable progress. The first meridian in his body became more and more loose, and he was close to breaking through completely. His soul had also stabilized at the early stage of the Void Realm. This progress made Zhou Yuan extremely excited, and he became even more diligent in his cultivation. Another day passed. Ding! Zhou Yuan held a small hammer and smashed a beast soul crystal. He inserted the heavenly Yuan brush into it, and the bristles rolled up, absorbing the beast soul inside. Buzz! Just as Zhou Yuan was about to smash the next beast soul crystal, the heavenly Yuan brush suddenly vibrated slightly, and a strange light slowly emanated from the brush. Zhou Yuan was startled at first, then his face lit up with joy. Because he saw that the first ancient source pattern on the heavenly Yuan brush was completely bright at this moment, emitting a mysterious light, apparently. After his nourishment over these days, this heavenly Yuan brush had finally recovered some of its spirituality and power. Master and Sister Yao Yao said that I would only know its secrets when the first pattern of the heavenly Yuan brush lights up. I want to see what's special about this once sacred source weapon. Zhou Yuan's eyes were glowing as he stared at the heavenly Yuan brush in his hand. He was obviously very curious about this heavenly Yuan brush. He held the heavenly Yuan brush, his eyes slightly closed. The light on the brush fluctuated, and a stream of obscure information flowed into his mind. Heavenly Yuan brush, first pattern, called Wenwu. Scholar or warrior? Zhou Yuan's eyes opened wide, a bright gleam flashing within, as he realized Zhou Yuan had said that the Heavenly Yuan brush was both a Genesis weapon and a Genesis rune brush. It was all because of this Genesis rune called Scholar or Warrior that gave the Heavenly Yuan brush its two forms. Warrior form. Zhou Yuan held the Heavenly Yuan brush and with a thought, he uttered a soft shout, hum, a strong burst of light erupted from the Heavenly Yuan brush. Zhou Yuan then saw with surprise that the brush, which was only about a foot long, began to expand rapidly. In just a few breaths, a thick black brush, about a foot in length, appeared in Zhou Yuan's hand. The brush, almost as tall as Zhou Yuan, had a mottled body that shimmered with a faint glow, especially at the tip of the brush. The originally soft white bristles tightly clung together and shimmered with a cold light, looking like the sharp tip of a spear. So heavy. Zhou Yuan looked at the somewhat oversized black brush in his hand. It was heavy, weighing down his arms. Let's test its power. Zhou Yuan left the house and entered the spacious courtyard. With a thought, the Heavenly Yuan brush in his hand vibrated slightly, causing the Genesis chi between heaven and earth to ripple and quietly flow into the brush. The so-called Genesis weapon was capable of absorbing the Genesis chi of heaven and earth to unleash powerful force. As the Genesis chi flowed in, the body of the Heavenly Yuan brush gradually glowed. Especially at the tip formed by the white bristles, a fluctuating light could faintly be seen, sharp and piercing. Zhou Yuan held the end of the brush as if he was holding a heavy spear, and suddenly swung it. He had never used such a strange weapon before, so he seemed a bit awkward. But his strength was not weak, so when the shadow of the brush whistled, it looked quite formidable. Whoosh, the shadow of the brush suddenly turned and fiercely stabbed towards a bronze cauldron on the side. A crisp sound rang out as the tip of the brush directly pierced the bronze cauldron and protruded from the other side. Not bad, it's sharp enough. Zhou Yuan saw this and slightly raised his eyebrows. This level of sharpness could easily tear apart the body of a 2-meridian practitioner. It should barely reach the level of a mid-grade Genesis weapon. Zhou Yuan was somewhat satisfied with this. If he continued to nourish it, allowing the Heavenly Yuan brush to constantly absorb beast souls, it wouldn't take long to reach the level of a mystical Genesis weapon. Using a brush as a weapon is quite unusual, but it does have the feel of a surprise weapon. Although it's a brush, it's similar to a long spear. I can learn some spear techniques in the future. Zhou Yuan muttered to himself. His gaze at the Heavenly Yuan brush became a bit hotter. This was just the first Genesis rune, but it had already caused such a change. He didn't know how powerful the Heavenly Yuan brush would be when all 9 ancient Genesis runes were fully restored. After swinging the warrior form Heavenly Yuan brush a few more times, Zhou Yuan finally felt satisfied. Then, with a thought, he said, Scholar form. The human height Heavenly Yuan brush suddenly shrank to about a foot in length and fell into Zhou Yuan's palm. The tip of the brush, which had been sharp enough to pierce through fine iron, became soft again, the bristles gently swaying. Zhou Yuan flicked his finger and the Heavenly Yuan brush spun flexibly in his palm. A light emerged from the soft tip of the brush. This form of the Heavenly Yuan brush was the Genesis rune brush, which could be used to draw Genesis runes. What an amazing scholar or warrior Genesis rune! Zhou Yuan praised. This kind of Genesis rune that could change the form of an object was certainly not something that ordinary Genesis runes could do. This Genesis rune called Scholar or Warrior must be of a very high grade. Have you finally activated the first rune on the Heavenly Yuan brush? While Zhou Yuan was in the courtyard, switching between the two forms with interest, a somewhat surprised voice came. Zhou Yuan looked up and saw Yao Yao, standing tall and beautiful outside the courtyard. At her feet, a little creature was following her, panting heavily. Yes, I just succeeded. Zhou Yuan nodded. The Heavenly Yuan brush turned into scholar form and fell into his palm. He eagerly said, Yao Yao, I have my Genesis rune brush now, when can you teach me Genesis runes? Yao Yao moved her lotus steps lightly and came to Zhou Yuan. She extended her snowy white hand. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan twitched his mouth, then ordered a maid to bring a jade bottle. This is red tiger wine, it's very strong. I stole it from my father's private cellar. Yao Yao took the jade bottle, tilted her swan-like slender neck, and took a gentle sip. A blush appeared on her pretty face, and she said with sparkling eyes, Not bad, you didn't skimp on me. It was obvious that she was very satisfied with the wine Zhou Yuan had found. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan also breathed a sigh of relief. He was about to speak when he felt a tug at his trouser leg. Looking down, he saw a little creature biting his trouser leg, sticking out its tongue, and extending its paw. You're just like your master. Zhou Yuan's eye twitched. He cursed silently, but still had to order a maid to bring a plate of Genesis beast dried meat and put it at his feet. Seeing this, the little creature let go of Zhou Yuan and lay down contentedly, one piece at a time, squinting its eyes and enjoying the delicious Genesis beast dried meat. Zhou Yuan also squatted down, stroking the soft fur of the little creature, and gave it a good rub. As for his actions, the little creature just glanced at him, and considering the Genesis beast dried meat, it didn't pay attention to this disrespectful guy. Alright, I'll start teaching you a grade 1 Genesis rune today. After drinking a few sips of red tiger wine, Yao Yao nodded with satisfaction, then walked into the stone pavilion. On the stone table, there was already a jade board for practicing Genesis runes. Yao Yao stood in front of the stone table, glanced at Zhou Yuan and said, "Alright, first, you watch." She clasped her hand, and a slender green Genesis rune brush appeared in her hand. This Genesis rune brush was glowing with a blue light, and within the glow, many light patterns emerged, making it look very mysterious. Zhou Yuan watched with a stir in his heart. Yao Yao's Genesis rune brush was obviously not ordinary. Yao Yao held the Genesis rune brush, and her pretty face instantly became serious. A different aura radiated from her, and the tip of the brush lightly landed on the jade board, then moved with her heart. Zhou Yuan stood by, watching Yao Yao's gently moving jade hand, and couldn't help but praise in his heart, "What a beautiful hand." Yao Yao's hand was slender and long, glowing like jade, beautiful enough to make one unable to take their eyes off. However, he didn't dare to look too much, and quickly focused his gaze on the jade board. When Yao Yao's last stroke fell, a light emerged from the jade board. A complex Genesis rune appeared on it, and faintly, it seemed as if the sound of a tiger's roar was heard. This is the Tiger Roar rune, a grade 1 Genesis rune. It can be inscribed on the throat. Once activated, it can emit a tiger's roar sound wave. If it bursts at close range, it can control the enemy. Yao Yao said lightly. A sound wave Genesis rune. Zhou Yuan was slightly surprised. This type of Genesis rune was quite rare, and could save one's life or even turn the tide of a battle at a crucial moment. How many Genesis marks do you see in this Genesis rune? Yao Yao casually asked. Upon hearing this, Zhou Yuan knew that Yao Yao was testing his Genesis rune foundation. After all, no matter how high the quality of a Genesis rune, it was composed of various large and small Genesis marks. Recognizing Genesis marks was the basic skill of learning Genesis runes. Zhou Yuan carefully looked at the Tiger Roar rune on the jade board. After a while, he slowly said, "I see 437. The introductory Genesis runes that Zhou Yuan had learned before only had about 100, but this grade 1 Genesis rune had 4 times as many. Yao Yao nodded slightly and said, "To be precise, there are 448. But being able to see 437 shows that your foundation is not bad. Over the next few days, you will simulate the Tiger Roar rune, and thoroughly master this grade 1 Genesis rune." Upon hearing this, a look of eagerness appeared in Zhou Yuan's eyes. If he could master this grade 1 Genesis rune, it would be a great help in improving his strength. With the big exam imminent, if he wanted to make it into the top 10, he needed to have the strength to compete with a 4 meridian practitioner. Therefore, he had to seize any method that could increase his strength. After a few more swings of the warrior form Heavenly Yuan brush, Zhou Yuan finally felt satisfied. Then, with a thought, he said, "Scholar form." The human height Heavenly Yuan brush suddenly shrank to about a foot in length and fell into Zhou Yuan's palm. The tip of the brush, which had been sharp enough to pierce through fine iron, became soft again, the bristles gently swaying. Zhou Yuan flicked his finger and the Heavenly Yuan brush spun flexibly in his palm. A light emerged from the soft tip of the brush. This form of the Heavenly Yuan brush was the Genesis rune brush, which could be used to draw Genesis runes. What an amazing scholar or warrior Genesis rune! Zhou Yuan praised. This kind of Genesis rune that could change the form of an object was certainly not something that ordinary Genesis runes could do. This Genesis rune called Scholar or Warrior must be of a very high grade. Have you finally activated the first rune on the Heavenly Yuan brush? While Zhou Yuan was in the courtyard, switching between the two forms with interest, a somewhat surprised voice came. Zhou Yuan looked up and saw Yao Yao, standing tall and beautiful outside the courtyard. At her feet, a little creature was following her panting heavily. "Yes, I just succeeded." Zhou Yuan nodded, the Heavenly Yuan brush turned into scholar form and fell into his palm. He eagerly said, "Yao Yao, I have my Genesis rune brush now, when can you teach me Genesis runes?" Yao Yao moved her lotus steps lightly and came to Zhou Yuan. She extended her snowy white hand. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan twitched his mouth, then ordered a maid to bring a jade bottle. "This is red tiger wine, it's very strong. I stole it from my father's private cellar." Yao Yao took the jade bottle, tilted her swan-like slender neck, and took a gentle sip. A blush appeared on her pretty face, and she said with sparkling eyes, "Not bad, you didn't skimp on me." It was obvious that she was very satisfied with the wine Zhou Yuan had found. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan also breathed a sigh of relief. He was about to speak when he felt a tug at his trouser leg. Looking down, he saw a little creature biting his trouser leg, sticking out its tongue, and extending its paw. "You're just like your master." Zhou Yuan's eye twitched, cursing silently. However, he could only instruct the maid to bring a plate of primeval beast jerky and place it at his feet. Upon seeing this, Tun Tun finally let Zhou Yuan go, lying down contentedly. One piece at a time, it savored the delicious primeval beast jerky with half-closed eyes. Zhou Yuan also squatted down, stroking Tun Tun's soft fur vigorously. Tun Tun cast a glance at him but chose to ignore this disrespectful man, considering it was enjoying its jerky. Alright, we will start learning the first-grade primeval patterns today. After taking a few sips of red tiger wine, Yao Yao, too, nodded satisfactorily and walked into the stone pavilion. The jade plate for practicing primeval patterns was already laid out on the stone table. Standing in front of the stone table, Yao Yao glanced at Zhou Yuan and said, "Alright, first, you watch." With a clasp of her slender hand, a thin green primeval pattern pen appeared. The pen glowed with a faint green light, revealing many light patterns, making it seem very mysterious. Zhou Yuan was slightly moved as he observed Yao Yao's pen, which was clearly not ordinary. Yao Yao held the primeval pattern pen, her pretty face turning serious. A different kind of aura emanated from her as the tip of the pen gently touched the jade plate, her hand moving with her heart. Standing beside her, Zhou Yuan admired Yao Yao's gently moving hand, internally praising, "Such a beautiful hand." Her hand was slender and delicate, glowing like jade, so beautiful that it was hard to take one's eyes off it. However, he did not dare to stare for long and quickly focused his gaze on the jade plate. When Yao Yao finished her last stroke, light emerged from the jade plate, revealing a complex primeval pattern. Vaguely, it seemed as if the sound of a tiger's roar could be heard. This is the tiger roar pattern, a first-grade primeval pattern. It can be engraved on the throat. Once activated, it can emit a tiger's roar, which can control opponents if exploded at close range, Yao Yao explained casually. A sound wave primeval pattern. Zhou Yuan was slightly surprised. This type of primeval pattern was quite rare, capable of saving lives and even turning the tide of battle at critical moments. Take a close look. How many primeval marks are there in this pattern? Yao Yao asked nonchalantly. Upon hearing this, Zhou Yuan realized that Yao Yao was testing his foundation in primeval patterns. After all, no matter how high the quality of a primeval pattern is, it is composed of various primeval marks, both large and small. Recognizing these marks is a basic skill in learning primeval patterns. Zhou Yuan studied the tiger roar pattern on the jade plate carefully. After a while, he slowly said, "I see 437. The introductory primeval patterns that Zhou Yuan had studied before only had about 100 marks, but this first-grade primeval pattern had 4 times as many. Yao Yao nodded slightly and said, "To be precise, there are 448. But the fact that you could see 437 shows that your foundation is not bad. Over the next few days, you will practice according to the tiger roar pattern and fully master this first-grade primeval pattern." Upon hearing this, Zhou Yuan's eyes lit up with eagerness. If he could learn this first-grade primeval pattern, it would greatly enhance his strength. With the grand examination looming, he wanted to be in the top 10. To do that, he needed the strength to contend with those who had opened 4 meridians. Therefore, he had to seize any opportunity to increase his strength. Mastering a source mark is not easy, for it is not a simple depiction. Each source mark requires the soul as ink. Sometimes, if the soul used in the painting is slightly stronger, the source mark cannot bear it and directly becomes ruined. If a source mark is ruined, it would be equivalent to the whole source pattern becoming a failure. Therefore, to achieve perfection, to finally form a source mark, it requires a lot of practice. So, in the following days, besides practicing the 98-form dragon play and the chaos divine mill contemplation method, Zhou Yuan would also take some time to continuously practice this tiger roar mark. At the same time, in order to familiarize himself with using the heavenly Yuan pen as a weapon, Zhou Yuan also took the time to practice some basic spear techniques, so as not to be without a foundation and not have a method when using it. This series of arrangements made Zhou Yuan's daily time extremely full, but he also knew that time was pressing, so he practiced diligently every day. And this diligent practice soon reached a critical point. On this day, Zhou Yuan, who was practicing in the flower garden, had a serious look on his face. His eyes revealed a trace of excitement and anticipation, because he could feel that the first pulse in his body, after these days of rush, was becoming more and more loose. If nothing unexpected happened, it is very likely that it will be completely open today. Finally, this day has come. Zhou Yuan clenched his fist. Over the years, he might have been dreaming of the day he opened his pulse. Zhou Yuan took a deep breath to calm his emotions a little. Then he raised his palms, and the 98-form dragon play quietly moved like flowing water. Roar. When the last form fell, Zhou Yuan's blood boiled, his bones vibrated, his back undulated, and faintly seemed to form a subtle dragon chant, which came out from his body. Zhou Yuan sucked in a breath, and the source chi of heaven and earth was immediately attracted, rolling over, turning into a white mist, and he swallowed it into his body. As soon as the source chi entered the body, it was guided by Zhou Yuan to hit the first pulse that was blocked by the last trace. Puff. That last trace of blockage did not form much obstruction at all. Only a slight sound was heard, as if a layer of non-existent membrane was broken. At the same time, Zhou Yuan felt that the first pulse in his body was completely opened at this moment. Zhou Yuan felt as if everything around him had become quiet. The blood in his body was boiling at this moment, and the first pulse was like a living thing, slowly wriggling, as if it had been hungry for a long time, and began to constantly devour the source qi that entered the body. The meridian absorbed the source qi, and then quickly fed back to the flesh. Zhou Yuan felt a series of sharp pains coming from his body, but he was not panicked, but his face was full of ecstasy. Because he could feel that with the arrival of the sharp pain, a sense of transparency permeated his body. His whole body became lighter at this time, and the flesh, bones, and skin in his body were all numbed up. That's the performance of the body being strengthened. This feeling lasted for about 10 minutes. Zhou Yuan's slightly closed eyes slowly opened, and then he smelled a strange smell emanating from his body. He looked down and saw that his skin was covered with dirt, which was the impurities expelled from his body when his body was strengthened. Zhou Yuan's eyes seemed to become much brighter at this time, and the whole world became clearer. Is this the opening of the pulse? Zhou Yuan slowly clenched his fist, feeling the increased power in his body, his eyes full of joy. This long-awaited scene has finally come true. Go and inform father and mother. Zhou Yuan went into the house to wash his body, and at the same time ordered the maid beside him. When Zhou Yuan washed himself clean and came out again, he saw that Zhou Qing and Qin Yu had been waiting here, and their faces were full of surprise. Yuaner, have you opened the first pulse? Seeing Zhou Yuan come out, Qin Yu stepped forward quickly, her gentle face full of excitement. Zhou Qing also came up, his eyes burning as he looked at Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan looked at the excitement on the faces of the two, and his heart warmed. Then he nodded, his mind moved, and the first pulse in his body vibrated slightly, emitting a suction force. Immediately, the source qi around him was drawn into his body through his pores, making his skin surface glow. Drawing qi into the body, it really is the opening of the pulse. Zhou Qing's eyes flashed, even he was a little lost at this moment, and laughed. Good, good, worthy of being my Zhou family's holy dragon. In just 10 days, the first pulse was opened. This speed, my great Zhou has never achieved it. Qin Yu's eyes were red, and she hugged Zhou Yuan, crying, if Yuaner can open the pulse to practice, then the resentment dragon poison 3 years later can be suppressed. Zhou Yuan also gently patted Qin Yu's back, comforting with a smile, Mother, don't worry, I will solve the resentment dragon poison. Come, Yuaner, let your father see how much your body has been strengthened after the opening of the pulse. Zhou Qing beckoned Zhou Yuan. Every time the pulse is opened, the physical fitness of the opener will be strengthened, far surpassing ordinary people. Zhou Yuan heard the words and nodded with anticipation. Zhang Yuan said that although his second opening of the pulse would be more difficult than ordinary people, once the pulse is opened, the benefits he would get would also be higher than ordinary people. Now, he wanted to try how high this high can be. Zhou Qing stood casually, beckoned Zhou Yuan with his palm, and just stood casually. There was a sense of power emanating, making Zhou Yuan breathless. Father is worthy of being a strong man who has broken the sky and entered the Tai Chu realm. The first way of the Source Master is to open the pulse. After the 8 pulses are opened, you can open the Qi Mansion and step into the Qi Nourishing Realm. Once the Qi Nourishing Realm is complete, you can rush to the sky. Once the sky is broken, you can leave the body at that time, move mountains and seas, and the power is unpredictable. And the so-called Tai Chu realm is located after the Tianguan realm. Open the pulse, nourish Qi, Tianguan, Tai Chu, these are the first 4 major realms of the Source Master. Now Zhou Yuan has just opened the first pulse, so facing a Tai Chu realm strong, naturally he is shocked by his momentum. First test the strength, use all your strength. Zhou Qing stretched out his hand and said. Zhou Yuan gave a nod, pushing off with his foot, his body shot out like an arrow. With a twist of his waist, the power within his body surged, converging into his fist. Instantly, the wind of his punch intensified, carrying a grandiose force, and it heavily collided with the outstretched hand of Zhou Qing. The dirt beneath Zhou Yuan's feet flew, but Zhou Qing's body remained unmoved. His palm didn't tremble in the slightest, but a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Zhou Yuan rubbed his fist, retreating somewhat dejectedly. His full-force punch had not even shaken Zhou Qing's palm in the slightest. Father, what do you think? He looked up at Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing didn't answer. Try your speed again, he said, with a twist of his palm. Dozens of pebbles on the ground began to rotate in his palm. With a sudden flick, the pebbles shot out, enveloping Zhou Yuan like a rainstorm. Each pebble was like an arrow. With a faint sound of breaking wind, Zhou Yuan pushed off the ground with the tip of his foot, quickly retreating to avoid most of the pebbles. However, a few were shot at tricky angles that left him nowhere to dodge. Zhou Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. At this moment, his spirit within his brow pulsed, his perception becoming incredibly sharp. The trajectories of the pebbles became unusually clear. With that, he swiftly extended his palm, catching the few pebbles with a couple of plop sounds. The force of the pebbles made Zhou Yuan's palm ache slightly. He grimaced, shaking his hand, and said to Zhou Qing, I almost couldn't catch them. Father? Zhou Yuan suddenly noticed Zhou Qing staring blankly at his pebble-catching hand. Hearing Zhou Yuan's voice, Zhou Qing came back to his senses, looking at Zhou Yuan with a strange expression. The pebbles he'd thrown earlier were deliberately powered, meant to test Zhou Yuan's resistance to impact, or his physical toughness, but he hadn't expected Zhou Yuan's eyes to be so sharp, discerning the trajectories of the pebbles and catching them. Was this coincidence, or something else? Zhou Qing shook his head, took another look at Zhou Yuan, and suddenly flicked a finger. A red thunderbolt shot out from his fingertip, and in a blink, it hit Zhou Yuan's chest. Bang! Zhou Yuan's body shook, and he was sent flying back, crashing into a large tree. He then clutched his chest and groaned in pain. Qin Yu quickly rushed forward to help him up, then angrily looked at Zhou Qing, saying, "Why did you have to use Yen Lei Qi, flame thunder energy?" Zhou Qing gave an awkward smile, walked over to check Zhou Yuan's chest. Although it was a bit bruised, it was clearly just a minor external injury. His eyelids twitched again. How could this resistance to impact be something a mere one-vein opener could achieve? How is it? Zhou Yuan rubbed his chest, making a bitter face. Zhou Qing looked at Zhou Yuan with a strange expression, saying, "Are you sure you've only opened one vein?" Zhou Yuan rolled his eyes in exasperation. Could he have opened two veins at once? Qin Yu also sensed something was off with Zhou Qing's reaction, anxiously asking, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with you, Honor?" "Something wrong?" Zhou Qing gave a bitter smile, saying, "Indeed, something is wrong. Because this kid's physical qualities, be it strength, speed, or resistance to impact, are not just superior to one-vein openers, but even two-vein openers might not be able to compete with him. For all these years, this is the first time I've seen a one-vein opener with such formidable physical qualities. Is his physical constitution stronger than that of those who have opened two meridians?" Upon hearing Zhou Qing's words, both Zhou Yuan and Qin Yu couldn't help but widen their eyes. Master Tsang Yuan wasn't lying to me. Although the difficulty of opening meridians is greater for me, the benefits I gain from it are also stronger. Zhou Yuan's eyes were filled with excitement. Judging from his father's assessment, at this point, his physical constitution was stronger than that of those who had opened two meridians, far surpassing ordinary one-meridian people, and if you add the origin patterns he had mastered, in terms of combat power, even those who had opened three meridians might not necessarily be able to defeat him. If I can master the tiger roar pattern as well, I should be able to win as long as I don't encounter someone who has opened four meridians. Zhou Yuan murmured to himself, feeling a sense of joy. His diligent cultivation over this period had indeed produced gratifying results. What's more, this gave Zhou Yuan hope, a hope that he could continue to climb upwards until one day, he could change everything. Zhou Qing looked at Zhou Yuan with burning eyes. He stretched out his remaining arm and heavily patted Zhou Yuan's shoulder. From his eyes, Zhou Yuan could see some unhidden excitement and expectation. "You Honor, you've done very well." Zhou Yuan's deep voice was trembling slightly at this moment, and even his eyes had turned red. That martial king thought that by stripping you of your Saint Dragon's luck, he could plunge our Zhou family Saint Dragon into an abyss of no return. But it seems that he has underestimated you. Looking at the emotionally fluctuating Zhou Qing, Zhou Yuan's mood also fluctuated. He knew that in the years when he had not opened his meridians, his father's ambition had been gradually worn away by the cruel reality, and perhaps his heart had begun to despair because reality gave Zhou Qing no hope. The Great Zhou Dynasty was barely surviving, while the Great Wu was becoming increasingly strong. He knew that once the deadline for the martial king's vow arrived, their Great Zhou would also face destruction, but now, at the moment when Zhou Yuan opened his meridians, the desperate Zhou Qing finally saw a glimmer of dawn. Even though this glimmer of dawn was still very weak, Zhou Qing believed that one day, this glimmer would turn into a bright sun, bursting out with the flames of revenge, and completely burning the Great Wu, taking back everything they had lost. Currently, the Great Wu was at war with two other major dynasties nearby and couldn't spare any effort to deal with their Great Zhou, so this was the best time for Zhou Yuan to grow. Zhou Yuan took a deep breath and suppressed his emotions. He knew that there was an immeasurable gap between him and the Great Wu at this point, so he needed to pull his gaze back from the distance. What he needed to do now was to enter the A-class courtyard through the major exam, and finally destroy the Qi King's mansions coveting of the position of the Great Zhou Mansion's master. Those in the top 10 of the major exam are basically at the 4 meridian level. I am not afraid to encounter 3 meridians now, but if it's 4 meridians, I'm afraid the odds of winning are not high. Zhou Yuan's eyes twinkled. So, to ensure that there were no accidents, he had to make further progress before the major exam and open the 2nd meridian. Once the 2nd meridian was opened, Zhou Yuan would have nothing to fear. He thought that even if he met Lin Feng, who was said to be the most likely to win the first place in the major exam, he would be confident. It seems that if I want to enter the A-class courtyard, I can't relax. Zhou Yuan said to himself. You Honor, now that you have opened 1 meridian, you can learn some origin techniques to maximize your strength. Zhou Qing also calmed down and said, the so-called origin techniques are techniques that can deploy one's own origin chi with greater power. In the world, origin techniques and origin weapons are generally named ordinary, mysterious, heavenly, and saint, divided into 4 grades of origin techniques. However, the higher the grade of the origin technique, the greater the demand on oneself. Most people in the open meridian realm can only practice some ordinary level origin techniques. I'll have some royal family origin techniques suitable for your cultivation sent to you later, and you can try to practice them. Zhou Yuan also nodded. Although he had opened his meridians, he could only say that he had a strong body but was unable to maximize it. This was ultimately because he had not practiced any origin techniques. So from now on, his daily cultivation schedule would have to be increased. Zhou Qing was very efficient, so soon there were several origin techniques delivered to Zhou Yuan. In the stone pavilion, Zhou Yuan was looking through these several origin techniques, the most powerful of which were the mixed Yuan palm and the shattered void bright fist, both of which were intermediate origin techniques. Zhou Yuan looked at these two origin techniques with a thoughtful expression. These two origin techniques were not particularly profound, but they were stronger than the lower-grade origin techniques. Of course, when opening meridians, the origin chi is not considered to be strong, so even if one practices profound origin techniques, they cannot display their power. As Zhou Yuan was immersed in these two intermediate origin techniques, he suddenly smelled a fragrant scent. He immediately looked up and saw Yao Yao standing next to him. She glanced indifferently at the two origin techniques in his hand. Very ordinary origin techniques. Yao Yao quickly withdrew her gaze and casually commented. What can you expect from an ordinary intermediate origin technique? Zhou Yuan smiled helplessly. Do you want to practice origin techniques? Zhou Yuan nodded, his gaze still lingering on the chart, saying, now that I've opened a meridian, I can finally use some origin chi. Naturally I need to learn origin techniques to ensure my combat power. If he didn't practice origin techniques, when he fought with others, would he just rely on his strong physical constitution to charge and fight? Upon hearing this, Yao Yao couldn't help but look at Zhou Yuan strangely, saying, you possess a unique technique, why do you still look at these common goods? Zhou Yuan's gaze hardened, he looked up at Yao Yao and asked, what do you mean? Seeing his look, Yao Yao pursed her red lips slightly, dull. Zhou Yuan gritted his teeth and said resentfully, all that good wine, did I feed it to you for nothing? Yao Yao propped up her cheek with her jade hand and lazily said, you've been practicing dragon play for so many days, don't you feel anything? Zhou Yuan looked thoughtful. After a while, he suddenly stood up, walked out of the stone pavilion, raised his palms, and slowly performed a set of 98 dragon play moves. This time he didn't finish quickly, but one move after another, very slowly. By the time he finished a set of dragon play, it had already taken half an incense stick's time. He stood there, motionless, as if tasting something. After a long time, his pupils suddenly shrank, and a look of shock appeared on his childish face. Then he looked up at Yao Yao in the stone pavilion, his voice somewhat incredulous. Is there an origin technique hidden in this dragon play? On Yao Yao's delicate face as bright as the autumn moon, a faint smile appeared, saying, although you're a bit slow, it's not hopeless. Then she stretched out two slender jade fingers and said lightly, to be precise, there are two sets of origin techniques hidden in the 98 moves of dragon play.